Hello guys, it's me, the Tank Index here, and today we're back from British tank tanks that four-way into Japanese tanks with the Carden Loyd Tankette. The Carden Loyd Tankette is a pretty cool design in my opinion, and it would lead to the most mass-produced light tank or tankette ever, which is a whole nother video. The tank had 69 millimeters of armor and weighed about 1.5 tons. It had a crew of a driver and a commander/gunner. And its only weaponry was a .303 Vickers gun with 1,000 rounds of ammunition. A Ford Model T 4-cylinder petrol engine held 10 imperial gallons of fuel, which gave it a nice operational range of 100 miles. Having a bogie suspension system with 4 rubber-tired wheels, it could go 30 miles an hour, which was honestly pretty good for its time. British military engineer and strategist Major Giffard Leque Martel, this guy right here, I believe, would end up creating a prototype out of spare parts, really. I know I said type. Spare parts, really, in his garage, which was pretty innovative. He ended up showing a prototype to War Office in the mid-1920s, and when his idea was actually published, the Carden Loyd Tractors Ltd. company was founded by Vivian Loyd and Sir John Carden, which would later be bought out by Vickers Armstrong in their goal to control all armor production in the British Isles. The same company would actually propose two-man tanks that would later morph into the Vickers light tank series, which is a whole other video. The Carden Loyd would be produced from 1927 to 1935. From 1933, it would be produced by the Royal Ordnance Factories, where there would be 450 made, most of which being Mark IVs. At least 325 were used by the British Army. Some variants were mortar carriers, light gun tractors, or smoke projector vehicles. The Mark VI would be the basis for the later Universal Carrier, or also known as the Bren gun carrier. There were many alternate versions. In 1921, Poland bought 10 or 11, which would later become the TK and TKS tankettes, which was unfortunately the backbone of their armor by the time they were invaded. Czechoslovakia would go on to buy 3, which would become the Tanzik VZ-33. The US would buy 20, labeled them as the K-25, and while they were originally supposed to be licensed productions, they would eventually morph into the T-27 tankette. Japan also bought 6, which would become the Type 94 tankette, and then Italy's purchase would turn into the L-335. Along with this, Belgium experimented with them, and even eventually more, I don't know why I wrote the Belgian experimented with them and experimented with them, that's great grammar on my part, which would eventually become the T-13 tank destroyer. As for exports, as you can see by all the flags I have spammed onto the screen, there were a lot. France got some, which would influence the Renault UE. India and Siam got some. Thailand used about 60 in the French-Thai War. Portugal bought 6, and Mexico got 20 after Japan conquered China and sort of just threw them at Mexico. And Greece got some as well, and Canada even used them for training roles. Latvia and the Netherlands bought some, and even the Panzer I was sort of influenced by this idea. Bolivia would use some in the Chaco War, being the first South American war to feature tanks, though they performed pretty poorly, mainly due to the terrain just being unsuitable for them. However, these tanks did have a pretty major downside. The major downside was honestly its suspension. Driving for only 10 to 20 minutes would give the crew headaches, while longer journeys caused motion sickness and exhaustion. Keep in mind that if the vehicle didn't break down, it could drive for 3 hours. So yeah, having this suspension was absolutely horrible. The Polish versions, the TK3, the TKS, the TK series in general, did fix this issue, and when Vivian Loyd went to visit the development in Warsaw, he called the suspension the best version of the design, which is pretty high praise. As for final assessments, despite the tank's major drawbacks, this tankette was obviously the most successfully sold tankette on the market ever, as while the Bren gun carrier was easily sold way more than it, by the time the Bren gun carrier truly came around, tankettes were absolutely useless. I mean, by that point, it was over for the tankette. I mean, at least in the interwar era, tankettes were something. By the time the Bren gun carrier really came into view, I mean, most soldiers had, anti-tank grenades, Panzerfaust, it was really useless. It would give, I guess you could call the Bren gun carrier better, though. It would give a bunch of countries motorized artillery or firepower that they otherwise wouldn't have at all. And it would lead the way to Universal Carrier, which would have more than 100,000 produced. While a relatively poor design with firepower too poor to be effective on literally anything other than infantry, it was still relatively successful in terms of a worldwide sold tankette, and honestly, if you gave this bad boy some armor-piercing rounds, I guess I could do something. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time. Peace.